Hello, my name is Susan Court. I live in Arlington, Virginia, and I am an amateur genealogist. I have been doing genealogy seriously for 7 years, researching my and other families' histories and writing their stories and related articles. Today I will present the first of 3 videos on the basics of genealogy. The 3 videos will cover researching, recording, and chronicling family history. Genealogy is not a new science or area of study. By definition, it's been around for a long time. Historically, those who collected information on families helped establish the legitimacy of someone's claim to a throne or an estate. The oldest family tree, the tree of Confucius, has been maintained for over 2,500 years. There is actually a Confucius genealogy compilation committee. More recently, Alex Haley's book and the TV series Roots in 1977 triggered widespread interest in people searching their heritage. Most recently, TV shows like Who Do You Think You Are?, History Detectives, and Finding Your Roots have had the same effect. A real surge in interest in genealogy has come from the increasing availability of records on the internet, in particular Ancestry.com. Related to the records online, inexpensive or free software is now available to manage family records. There are also myriad historical and genealogical societies. I belong to 4 in the United States and 3 in the UK that help preserve records and promote research into family history. To start, I would like to mention that the views expressed in this presentation are mine and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Arlington Office of Senior Adult Programs. Likewise, neither the office nor I endorse any product, service, or publication mentioned in the presentation. As a preface to today's video, I would like to share a quotation attributed to Della Cummings Wright around 1943. It captures nicely what a genealogist is all about. We are the chosen. In each family there is one who seems called to find the ancestors, to put flesh on their bones and make them live again, to tell the family story and to feel that somehow they know and approve. Doing genealogy is not a cold gathering of facts, but instead breathing life into all who have gone before. We are the storytellers of the tribe. By way of introduction, I want to cover 4 topics as listed here: motivation, objectives, definitions, and terminology. So why do we pursue genealogy? We're curious about our family. We want to preserve our heritage for our children and grandchildren. We are interested in knowing more about our family's medical history. We may need the information for religious reasons. The most well-known example of this is the doctrine of baptism in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The Mormons who trace their family trees to find the name of ancestors so that these relatives from past generations can be baptized by proxy in the temple. We may want to join an historical organization like the Daughters of the American Revolution. We may be searching for new relatives or lost or separated family members. Or, of course, all of the above. The objectives, of course, depend on our motivation. Perhaps we just want to collect the data and assemble a family tree. Or maybe we want to go further and write our family story. In either case, there are many great benefits. In researching all 4 branches of my family's tree, I have learned so much history. I have discovered ancestors who were, in their own way, real heroes and heroines. And I've connected with hundreds of cousins, literally hundreds, who have enriched my life. A brief note on one of my heroines, my great-great-grandmother, Frances Brown, who was born Françoise Braun in Marlenheim, France. As a widow, she brought a 4-year-old daughter, my great-grandmother, to America in 1842. She worked on her uncle's farm in Zanesville, Ohio, and married again, but her husband died shortly before their son was born. She married a third time, and with this husband and another child, traveled by flatboat down the Ohio River to Sanfordtown, Kentucky, close to Cincinnati. So eventually, she had 11 children and 52 grandchildren. Many of her descendants became prominent businessmen and politicians in northern Kentucky. Her strength and fortitude have always blown me away. Third, there are certain definitions with which you need to be familiar. Pedigree refers specifically to the ancestors of a particular person. Technically, according to the Society of Genealogists, genealogy is the establishment of a pedigree by extracting evidence from valid sources of how one generation is connected to the next. Family history is a biographical study of a genealogically proven family and of the community and country in which they lived. So genealogy is a compilation of ancestors, those who go before, and descendants, those who come after a particular person. And family history is putting it all together in a cohesive format. However, genealogy and family history are frequently used interchangeably. Finally, by way of introduction, I want to point out the term grand in the context of genealogy. It means that the relatives in question are 2 generations removed from one another. So, for example, the little angel, or I guess maybe she's Tinkerbell, in this picture is my granddaughter. The 3 women behind her are, left to right, my mother and her 2 sisters, my aunts. Therefore, respectively, they are the little Tinkerbells, great-grandmother, and great-grand-aunts, not great-great-aunts. Overall, in the videos, as I mentioned, I will cover these 3 topics: researching family history, recording family data, and chronicling the family story. Today's presentation will focus on the first, research. I have broken this topic, research, into 4 areas: initial challenges, manual research of family and public records, electronic research online, and genetic, that is, DNA analysis. There are several initial challenges you will encounter in conducting research. First, there are many sources of frustration. Names will have different spellings. Sometimes a foreign name will be anglicized. In my family, the name Rice, spelled R-A-I-S in Germany, became R-I-C-E in America. Sometimes it's a phonetic spelling produced by a census taker. The surname spelling of my friend Jerry Coyne, C-O-Y-N-E, appears as C-O-I-N and K-Y-N-E in various censuses. Sometimes the person went by different names. Philomena Kaposha, another friend's grandmother, was also known as Giovanna Kaposha. Note, there is a way to address different spellings by using the asterisk wildcard, and I've made a note of that on this slide. You may encounter different calendars. In researching my Alsatian ancestors, I had to learn how to convert the French Revolutionary calendar to the Gregorian calendar. You may encounter different dates. If you haven't already, you'll soon learn that census takers also had their challenges. The person talking to the census taker may have been a neighbor, or a 12-year-old boy, or someone who didn't speak English very well. Plus, years ago, people were not that precise about dates. Frequently, they didn't even know when they were born, or they wanted to make themselves appear older or younger. So be patient and just keep trying to find the most commonly used one. Bottom line, records aren't perfect. National and regional boundaries change. When I was working on the Kaposha story, old records said the family came from Alvido in Caserta, Italy, but now Alvido is in the province of Forcione. A second challenge is avoiding temptation. Online trees and published genealogies may be useful if they take you to a document, but the online trees are often filled with mistakes. So you must always be skeptical of another person's research until you've checked his sources and made sure dates and other vital information match. Generally, I just look for clues in online trees, and I'm very appreciative if I find a document that I otherwise had not been able to find. Finally, you must maintain your sanity. The pursuit of genealogy can get very confusing if you try to do several branches at the same time. Been there, done that, almost went nuts. I eventually broke my research into 4 separate projects covering the 4 branches of my family as defined by my 4 sets of great-grandparents. Now, there are other ways of doing it. That's just the way I did it. And then I focused on just one person in the branch at a time. Aware of the challenges you may encounter, you are now ready to start your research. As I mentioned, the research could be done manually or electronically or through DNA analysis. These are not, of course, mutually exclusive. Indeed, you will mix and match them as you proceed. For our purposes here, however, I will take them in order. First, manual research. In this regard, start with your own records before you go backward, forward, sideways. Get a firm base, especially before you jump into the online services. Talk to the oldest people in your family, and do this as soon as possible. Of course, you may be the oldest person in your immediate family, as am I, but I have received fantastic assistance from second cousins who are close to my age. I even wrote an article about the value of second cousins. Prepare a list of questions before you talk to your relatives. Let me digress here for a moment. I have a list of sample questions and other items like sample forms and articles that I will be happy to provide to anyone who is interested. They really didn't lend themselves to a PowerPoint presentation. There's too much information to put on a slide, for example. But at the end of this presentation, I will give you my email address, and you can just email me and I will send you a package. Collect family records, such as family Bibles, letters, photographs, wills, diplomas, school records, journals, birth and marriage certificates. By the way, the picture here on the slide is a page from the Court Family Bible. Be prepared for some who will push back. I have encountered relatives who thought I was engaged in some kind of scam. Others just weren't all that interested. On balance, however, my experience in reaching out to relatives has been wonderful. They have been very cooperative and supportive. Explore other family member stories and compilation of family data. Of course, as with anybody else's research, handle this carefully. Don't take everything at face value. Conversely, be sure you eventually give credit where credit is due. If for no other reason, it keeps peace in the family. Finally, separate fact from myth in what you hear or what you collect. Otherwise, you may end up going down a rabbit hole. Now, a small rabbit hole now and then is to be expected. I went down a really big one when I followed up on what I had heard about my great-great-grandmother, again, Frances Brown. My mom told me that she was from Nancy, France, in the province of Lorraine, where I spent days researching in very dusty archives. Turns out she was from Marlenheim in the province of Alsace, across the mountains to the east. The second major source, get down to it, the second major source of data to pursue manually as well as electronically are the public records. In the materials that I would be happy to provide to you, I have a long list of these types of records. records created by governments at the local level, birth, death, marriage, divorce, adoption, probate, voter registrations, and at the federal level, census, passports, ship manifests, draft registrations. Records created by churches and other religious organizations, baptisms, confirmations, first communions, bar mitzvahs, school records, cemetery records, newspaper stories, and obituaries. The list goes on and on. Let me say a little more about U.S. Census records. The U.S. started taking a census in 1790. These records are available with the exception of 1890 through 1940. The 1890 records were mostly destroyed when they became waterlogged and then disposed of. Census records are released 72 years after they are taken. So the 1950 census records will be available in 2022. Between 1790 and 1840, the census just recorded the head of the household and the number of people by sex, age, race. 1850 is considered the golden year for genealogists because the enumerators started collecting more detailed information, including the names of others in the household. 19 states, like New York, conducted state censuses for some years. New York stopped in 1925. Before you start looking for records, it helps to get the lay of the land, meaning what and where are records available. For that purpose, there are state and national guides. State and county historical and genealogical societies, most of which have websites, can also be helpful in learning what might be available in their area. Finally, the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, and I believe the church prefers that whole title being used, has a website called Wiki, W-I-K-I, that has detailed information on what is available in various communities. Let me emphasize, however, Wiki is not a database of genealogical information. It is just a navigational tool to help you find where such information can be found. This is a screenshot from Wiki showing what records can be found in Kenton County, Kentucky, where I was born and where most of the physical records for my family can be found. Let me be more specific of where you will locate records. For federal records, there are two main sources conveniently located only a short distance away. The National Archives, the largest and most complete depository of federal government documents, census, ship passenger lists, naturalization papers, military service records, federal land records, and passports, and the Library of Congress. For state and local, I've listed on this slide some of the relevant repositories in the D.C. metropolitan area in the event that your ancestors lived in these three jurisdictions. By the way, not too long ago, it was announced that the Library of Virginia was returning to Arlington a trove of historic documents, including personal property tax records back to the 1840s, precinct and teacher registers from the early 1900s, and election papers and other miscellaneous records. They're going to the Center for Local History, located at the Woodmont Community Center on Fillmore Street in Arlington. Before I leave the subject of libraries, I want to mention the Family History Library in Salt Lake City and two of its branches located here in Northern Virginia. The Family History Library is owned and operated by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It is the world's largest genealogical library. It has 45 full-time and part-time staff and 550 full and part-time volunteers. Its collection includes 4 million rolls of microfilm, over 600,000 books, serials, and maps, free access to billions of online records, 550 internet computers, and 1,200 microfilm and microfiche readers. The library has 2 local branches, the addresses for which I have noted on this slide. There is no cost to visit a family history center or a family history library. They are open to anyone with an interest in genealogical research. I have done research in Salt Lake City, and it was a fantastic experience. I'm scheduled to return in June. Of course, that's up in the air right now. Before leaving manual research, I would like to tell you about Mary Louise Hardin Coyne. She is 91 years old and does all of her research manually. That is, she does no online research. She doesn't even own a computer. She has collected an incredible amount of data on her and her family's history by visiting courthouses, cemeteries, churches, libraries, digging through old newspapers, calling or corresponding with county clerks and cemetery officials. I think she could have been a very effective telephone salesperson, as she can get information out of a county clerk over the phone that I don't think even as a lawyer I could do in person. She is my genealogy hero. As a transition to electronic research, I wanted to share a form with you that is a handy checklist, regardless of how you're conducting your research. A fellow genealogist shared this with me last year in Salt Lake City. That brings me to another thing I want to mention. Genealogists, especially amateur ones, are usually very, very helpful to one another. They love what they do, and they love to share not only the data they've collected, but also the tools that they have used. To start the discussion of electronic research, as I pointed out earlier, many records are now available online. Some experts estimate that about 1/4 of the genealogical records are online. Frankly, I don't know how they come up with that estimate, as how does anyone know really how many records are out there? Regardless, online databases still provide an incredible amount of information literally at your fingertips. The online databases are a great way to build on the records you've collected from your family, libraries, and other archival collections. There are literally hundreds of online databases, some broad, others narrowly focused. The ones that allow you to do the widest range of research and actually get access to the documents are listed here, headed by the Big Four. I subscribe to the first 3, and the 4th one I have an account on. It's free. But the 3 that I do subscribe to cost me about $710 a year. A few more words about the Big Four, which are compared and contrasted on this chart. Significantly, their records overlap. However, they are known for specific areas or features. Ancestry.com is the dominant company in the field. It hosts the largest online collection of family history records going back to the 13th century. It is owned by a company called ProQuest, which was started by 2 Brigham Young students and is headquartered in Lehi, Utah. As of 2017, it surpassed the 20 billion record mark. It claims that it adds 2 million records a day to its database. Ancestry offers country-level subscriptions for the US, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Mexico, Sweden, and the UK. You can use it for free. For example, you can go to the website and you can put in your parents' names and birth dates, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. But once you want to look at a document, you'll be asked if you want to join for a trial membership, say 2 weeks. Paid subscriptions include US Discovery, World Explorer, and All Access. I have an All Access account. Ancestry.com also owns and continues to buy up other platforms. Archives.com, RootsWeb, Newspapers.com, Find a Grave, Fold3.com, which are military records. Find a Grave is the only one that is free. Ancestry.com also operates the platform for Heritage Quest Online. MyHeritage.com started in Israel and expanded through the world. It gives educational institutions and libraries access so that you can get to their information that way. It is not as expensive as Ancestry. It is strong in European records, particularly the Scandinavian countries, and global Jewish content. Find My Past core content is for England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, with some coverage of places settled by British Isle immigrants. In this regard, for example, my husband and I searched for a couple of years for his Irish grandparents' marriage certificate in the New York City area. We could not find it. About 6 months ago, Find My Past posted information about Roman Catholic churches in the New York City area, which were predominantly Irish, and we found the record there. Find My Past strength is in older UK records. Ancestry has greater number of more recent UK records. Finally, FamilySearch.org is free. It is owned and operated by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The church is very upfront about the information it collects from people who have accounts on FamilySearch.org. Their ultimate goal is to create one tree. They believe that everyone is related. I have, as I mentioned, an account on FamilySearch.org. I don't maintain my tree on FamilySearch, but I do use FamilySearch.org for research purposes. Down to the next slide. Yep. There are other online services that can help you find information. The two newspaper sites are obvious. The first is owned by Ancestry, and the second is owned by Heritage Microfilm in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It supposedly has the largest collection of newspapers. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what they claim. White Pages Premium is my dream machine. It is not cheap, but it enables me to find current information that in turn enables me to go backward. It's a complicated process, which I've kind of created myself or figured out myself, which I explain in an article that I wrote and was published last year, I guess, in the by the Kentucky Genealogical Society. And again, I can send it to you if you're interested. Of course, Google can be a great source. I have found information with a simple Google search when everything else has failed. Then there are the social networks, in particular Facebook. It absolutely amazes me how many people do not put privacy controls on their Facebook accounts. So that kind of, I go, no, really? However, as a genealogist, I'm kind of grateful. I found a cousin, for example, in Litchfield, Kentucky. When I searched his name on Facebook, found a picture of him standing in front of his real estate office, which showed his phone number. I was pretty sure it was my cousin, but I had a phone number, and I called him, and sure enough, he is my cousin. Before moving to the next slide, I want to mention that at the end of part 2, that's the next video, Recording Family Data, I will have a series of exercises that will show you how to actually do the research electronically. Because that effort, that process, is intertwined with recording the data at the same time electronically, I decided to combine the two in a set of exercises, which I will show you at the end of video 2. The last topic for researching your family's heritage is the use of genetic analysis, or DNA. This is a relatively new approach to create or fill holes in a family tree. On this slide, I've just laid out the basics, most of which you probably know. Each person has a genealogical and a genetic family tree. The first can include everyone. The second only includes some of your kin. Most people have 23 chromosome pairs. The 23rd determines gender. We inherit one half from our father, one half from our mother. So does a sibling, but the mix may be different. That is why siblings look different, although identical twins inherit identical combinations. On average, I emphasize on average, we inherit 25% of our DNA from each of our grandparents. There are three types, DNA types of particular interest. There's empty DNA that we all possess, and that is passed down through the direct female line. The Y chromosome, or Y DNA, present only in males, passed down through the direct male line. And the autosomal DNA, which is found in the 22 non-gender specific chromosomes inherited from both parents, which can uncover relatives from any branch of the family, whether it's on the mother's side or on the father's side. There are 5 major DNA testing companies whose tests look at hundreds of thousands of markers. My DNA file is over 13,000 pages long. The major DNA testing companies are Ancestry DNA, which is known for cousin matching most geographic regions for ethnicity or biographical information. Family Tree DNA, best for serious genealogy, including Y-DNA and mtDNA tests. MyHeritage, which is probably the best test on a budget. 23andMe, best for genetic health screening, not genealogy necessarily. Living DNA, best for roots in the British Isles. As I've noted on this slide, 23andMe was the original DNA testing company to report health information. Now 3 more companies are doing the same for an extra charge. This slide gives you an overview of the various DNA services. Note that 23andMe is not on it because, as I mentioned to this point, 23andMe is mainly patronized by people wanting medical information. But more and more the company is adding genealogical information, and I'm going to show you something in a few minutes along those lines. And conversely, as I mentioned, the other companies are now developing a medical branch. By the way, I've submitted my DNA to 3 of the companies: Ancestry, MyHeritage, and 23andMe. So what can a DNA analysis do for the genealogist? Well, it can confirm or correct family trees and pedigrees. It can help you find new relatives you never knew existed. And it can help you learn more about your family's origin. That's the biogeographical information. My experience with using DNA for genealogical purposes has included all 3. Initially, as is true for most people who submitted their DNA when these companies came on the scene, I learned more about my ethnicity. Where did my family come from, as displayed on the right side of this slide. It reinforced my genealogical research. My ancestors mainly came from Western Germany, the Heils, Southern Germany, the Vollmers, Eastern France, the Schlossers, and England and Ireland, the Courts. Using DNA also confirmed the discovery of a second cousin once removed who had emigrated from England to Western Australia in 1920. At first, when I made contact with her descendant through Ancestry.com, the descendant was not convinced that we were related as we did not match on Ancestry DNA. At the suggestion of her husband, I uploaded my Ancestry DNA file, that's how I found out how large it was, to MyHeritage DNA, and voila, there was a match. She now accepts me as her cousin, and that cute Aussie in the picture is her great-grandfather. And finally, I found a second cousin through Ancestry DNA whom I never knew about. Her name is Shirley. She lives in Cincinnati. Her father and my father were first cousins, and our grandfathers were brothers. We've become FaceTime buddies, and we meet up when I go home to northern Kentucky for a visit. This is not magic, because each generation receives only 50% of the DNA from a previous generation. You will actually fail to match most of your genealogical cousins beyond the fourth cousin level. That involves 10 degrees of separation. Conversely, a second cousin or closer will share DNA. In the next few slides, I will walk through some concepts and tools that you need to know to use the results of a DNA test to conduct research into your family's heritage. First, this slide is an overview of the approximate number of centimorgans you will share with relatives, starting with your closest, a parent or child, to a very distant cousin. A centimorgan, by the way, is simply a unit for measuring genetic linkage. This is a screenshot from my Ancestry DNA analysis. So far, of those in my family who have taken the test, I am most closely related to my niece Nancy. We share 1,819 centimorgans. Brian and WC are my nephews. Aaron and Emma are a grandnephew and grandniece, respectively. And JP is my first cousin Joey. As of today, I have 31,690 matches on Ancestry DNA. Of those, only about 400 are fourth or closer cousins. Here are the results from MyHeritage DNA. I sorted it by Irish, Welsh, Scottish roots so that Robert Binks, the uncle of the cousin who questioned our relationship at first, would show up. And I communicate with him. He lives outside of Perth, and he and I have been communicating recently, sharing our experiences in the present circumstances. It's been interesting to find out what Australia is doing as we are doing here in the United States. Periodically, the companies will send you updates when more people with whom you are related take their tests. Now I want to introduce you to Dr. Blaine Bettinger, whom I had the pleasure of meeting and hearing speak last August at a conference sponsored by the Kentucky Genealogical Society. Dr. Bettinger is considered an expert, if not the leading expert, on the use of DNA to conduct genealogical research. His book on the subject, noted here, is the go-to source for this purpose. Listed to the right are just a few of his tips. Focus first on your closest matches, the ones with whom you have an estimated relationship of fourth cousins or closer. You have a pretty good chance of finding common ancestry, such as a great-grandparent with second cousins or closer, and a decent chance of doing the same, that is, finding a shared second or third great-grandparent with predicted third and fourth cousins. Build a family tree to upload to facilitate finding matches. And finally, pursue shared matches. I'll address each of these in turn. First, focus on the closest matches. This chart simply depicts closest matches and the percentage of centimorgans on average you will share with them. So it will give you some idea of what is considered a close match. Second, build a tree. Now, if you already have a tree on, say, Ancestry.com, and you've submitted your DNA to Ancestry DNA, you can, of course, just use that one. However, you would have to remove any privacy controls you would have on that tree. My tree is on Ancestry.com with over 4,400 entries, but it is not viewable by the public. I have privacy controls on my tree. Now, I have to maintain that tree on Ancestry, and I'll explain in the next video why that's important, but it's not viewable. It's only viewable by me and usable by me. So in other words, I have privacy controls on it. So if you wanted to use your tree on Ancestry for the DNA purposes on Ancestry DNA, you'd have to remove your privacy controls. So I haven't, but I've decided to do something else. I've decided to build what I call kind of a shadow tree. So in order to take advantage of the next step that I'll discuss, which is sharing matches, I have been recreating my tree on Ancestry DNA with the major ancestors and major like grand aunts and grand uncles. It doesn't include anything below my parents. In other words, no one below my parents except myself is in this tree. So my current tree on Ancestry.com includes babies who were born just like 6 months ago. So the tree that I'm creating on for DNA purposes is just basically my grandparents' generation and previous generations. Okay. Finally, as suggested by Dr. Bettinger, you will want to pursue shared matches. So what is the difference between a match and a shared match? Aren't all the matches shared? Well, no. One of my matches may be a descendant of my great-grandfather, Joe Schlosser, but not a descendant of my great-grandfather, W.C. Hiles. So look at this slide. Everyone listed here is a close match to me, and I recognized all but 3 of them. The others are all cousins whom I've discovered through traditional genealogical research. So why don't I know the others or even recognize their names? These are close relatives. What family do they belong to? What branch of my family do they belong to? So I decided to look a little further into this, and I picked one of those 3. I picked Shane Noam, who had a fairly extensive tree uploaded on Ancestry DNA. Now note that the program here on the left said that it could find no common ancestors. The reason, of course, is that I don't have my full tree uploaded for public viewing. Hence, that's why I started to create my shadow tree. So now going back to this slide, I still wanted to pursue the possible connection, and so I selected up there, and I've circled it, shared match option on the Ancestry DNA site. What that action produced was the slide you see here. Shane and I share a connection with 6 other people. I know all of them except one. 2 of them, Chuck and Jenny, V-Y, are my second cousins. Beowulf, his first name is John, he lives in Quebec. Mike and Shelley are my second cousins once removed. So what do all of us cousins have in common? One ancestor, Joe Schlosser. But Joe had 2 wives, Barbara Eschman and Albertine Ritz. Now I can narrow the information down more. Chuck, John, Shelley, and I are descendants of Joe Schlosser and Albertine Ritz. Mike and Jenny are descendants of Joe Schlosser and Barbara Eschman. From this information, I can reasonably surmise that Shane and I are likely related through Joe Schlosser, as he is the common ancestor discovered so far. But of course, I wish things were all that simple. I was bothered by the shared match that Shane and I had with Tracy Schumacher. So I dug deeper into her and checked out our shared matches. Well, Shane, of course, shows up, and Shane shows up, but two different cousins show up too, and I recognize them. A second cousin and a second cousin once removed. And we all share a common ancestor, my great-grandfather, Charles Court. Now I have an even bigger mystery to pursue. It appears that Shane and I may be related through two separate branches of my family, the Schlossers and the Courts. By the way, Shane lives in Kenton County, Kentucky, where I grew up, and we have been in communication to pursue our relationship. I have one last slide to share with you about DNA companies' programs. Recently, I submitted my DNA to 23andMe. That company has a new family tree building tool that automatically generates visualization of your relationships to genetic matches who have opted into the DNA relatives feature. It differs from those on Ancestry or MyHeritage because it's based solely on genetic relationships and age, rather than also incorporating tree data provided by the testers. It looks like a neat program, but I have not decided yet whether and to what extent I'm going to pursue it. At a certain point, I get data overloaded, and I need to step back and pick and choose what I will pursue. Recall what I said in the beginning. You must maintain your sanity, which can be threatened if you go down too many paths at the same time. Finally, regarding DNA, you may ask, who can access DNA results submitted to these commercial DNA testing companies? The Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008, the acronym is GENA, is a federal law that protects individuals from genetic discrimination. That's defined as the misuse of genetic information in health insurance and employment. GENA makes it illegal for health insurers to request, require, or use genetic information to make decisions about your eligibility for health insurance, your health insurance premiums, contribution amounts, or coverage terms. GENA makes it against the law for employers to use your genetic information to make decisions about hiring, firing, promotion, pay, privileges, or terms, or to limit, segregate, classify, or otherwise mistreat an employee. Law enforcement officials, except in D.C. and Maryland, may access DNA information collected by the commercial companies to track down a person involved in a crime. You may recall how California was able to identify the Golden State Killer, whose DNA they had, but which they could not connect to any DNA on file on any of their databases. Working with a genealogist, they were able to create a huge family tree and eventually track down the killer through a shared third-degree great-grandfather. This concludes part 1 of genealogy in 3 parts. The next 2 video presentations will cover recording family data and crafting a family story. If you have any questions on this presentation or want a copy of the materials I've mentioned along the way, feel free to contact me at the email address noted here, susanjcourt@gmail.com. Thank you very much and have a good day.